Welcome back. Let's do a fun little exercise that is a little bit tricky as well. Let's say I have a function called weird. And this function weird has a height of 50. Where do you think this height property or height variable is located? Let's run this and see what happens. I'm going to run weird, get undefined because it's not returning anything, but if I return height, I get 50. Okay, but is height being created in the variable environment of weird? Well, no. And that's because JavaScript is a little bit weird here. This is actually called leakage of global variables. Because what JavaScript does underneath the hood is that it looks at height, it says, this isn't in my, nothing's been declared. I haven't seen a var or a const or a let keyword, so I don't have it. Those keywords tell JavaScript to put those in our variable environment, but it's not there. So it's going to go up the scope chain to the global environment and says, hey, is there such thing as a height? And the global environment is going to say, nope, I don't have it. But it's not throwing an error, is it? And that's because the global environment actually sees that this doesn't exist and will create it for you, just as it's looking up the scope chain. Now, don't you think that's weird? That doesn't make any sense, right? This is something that in the past with JavaScript you could do, and it caused a lot of problems. So now we have something like useStrict, that if I add it to the top of a page, you may have seen things like this. useStrict was introduced as a way to prevent JavaScript for doing these weird, unpredictable edge cases. Because JavaScript was written by a programmer, and there's no such thing as a perfect programming language or a perfect program. And useStrict allows us to avoid these pitfalls that shouldn't happen. And you see over here, as soon as I used useStrict, it's going to say height is not defined because it's going to go up the scope chain and it's going to say, nope, you've never really declared this variable. I have no idea what you're talking about. So I have to use variable or let or const to declare that variable. All right, JavaScript is weird. Here's another one. Let's say we have a variable, call it hey, another creative name by me. And in here, this variable will have a function, but instead of an anonymous function, it's going to have a name. Let's call it doodle. And this function will, let's say, do something. It's not really doing anything, is there? Now, if I run hey, and actually let's just console log here, or just return hey. If I run this, well, that's expected. But what if I run doodle? What do you think will happen? Take a guess. Well, if I run this, I get a reference error. What does that mean? That means it's nowhere to be seen in the scope chain. This is because the doodle function is actually enclosed in its own scope. Doodle gets actually added to its own execution context's variable environment. Very weird, right? But that's a little gotcha over here where we can't access it on the global scope. We can only access it here. All right. I hope that didn't confuse you too much. Just fun little tricks to confuse your programming friends. All right. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.